They say silence is strength. But sometimes silence is just a scream held underwater. I was 9 when I learned that monsters don't live under beds. They sleep in the next room. I was the bruised fruit. No one picked at the market of affection. School was no escape. It was a stage where I wore invisibility like a costume. At home, the air smelled like rage and burnt rice. My father's fists were punctuation marks, 2 sentences I never spoke. Therapists called it developmental trauma. I called it surviving the apocalypse in slow motion. And yet I didn't break. I bent. Like a rusted pipe in winter, I groaned, but didn't snap. In the quiet corners of my mind, I plotted my escape. Not in miles, but in inches. One hand in front of me, one behind. Sometimes the hardest journey, the one that starts at the end of your bed and ends at the front door. When you survive childhood trauma, the world applauds. You, they say, oh, look at you. Aren't you special? But they don't understand the cost. They don't see the hand you're holding. The adult world may think it's cute when you write sad poetry or doodle dark pictures. They call it artistic. They don't know it's you holding back the tide of bad dreams with a crayon. If you grew up behind closed doors, you will know what it means to fold origami boats out of paper towels and sail them in the toilet stream. Because for some kids, that porcelain bowl was their private ocean, the only place to let go without being let go of. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. If you grew up behind closed doors, when life gives you lemons, you hide them. You don't trust anything that tastes too good to be true. You know, the sweetness hides a punch. Some wounds don't need an enemy. It's just a trigger, a word, a scent, a shout, a touch. And suddenly you're back in that bedroom, reliving history. A wave of nausea, goosebumps, heart palpitations, you name it. Your body becomes a traitor, betraying your peace. People who haven't walked through fire think it's funny to throw gasoline on your memories. And you spend years waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to be scared of the dark. My mother left when I was 2, leaving my father and I to build our own world inside 4 walls. The walls had eyes. They saw everything. I used to think love was a swear word because that was all he ever yelled. And I wondered if love tasted like pepper spray once I hid in a closet for 6 hours, not from a game from him. The smell of leather and liquor seared into my lungs like a branding iron. Every time he screamed, my bones learned Morse code in fear. I used to pray for rain on days he went out drinking, because then the sound of thunder drowned his footsteps. Those nights were my lullabies. I slept with one eye open, the other bruised shut by habit. And I finally found my voice. It wasn't in a library. It was in the bathroom. The tiles became my audience, absorbing my tears and whispered pleas. Some nights, my legs would wake up before the rest of me, and I'd de-grab onto the sheets to steady myself. Then the nightmares came. Faces I didn't recognize, places I didn't know, conversations in a language I couldn't understand. But the feelings were all too familiar. Abandonment, betrayal, terror. I'd wake up gasping, convinced I was drowning in thin air. And there were days when everything was fine, almost too fine. I'd come home smelling of lavender instead of stale waste. And my skin would itch because I was allergic to that cologne, just like I'm allergic to roses, tulips, lilies. Anything my mom used to wear. My senses became landmines. One wrong step, and boom, flashback. I never understood the appeal of scented candles. In my world, vanilla meant vanilla extract, which meant pancakes, which meant her. She made the best pancakes, and she never stayed for seconds. I always thought I was broken, a collector's item of defective humans. When I started therapy, the first words out of my mouth were, "Do you have a junkyard where I can leave my loose screws?" I joked. But underneath it was a cry for help. Help me fix myself. But the therapist said, "You're not broken. You're a survivor." I looked at him like he was speaking Greek. How do I switch off this survival mode? There's nothing to switch off. You have adapted. It's not a bug. It's a feature. He explained something about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Something about my brain's smoke alarm was blaring, and the CEO had been kicked out of the office. He handed me a book on trauma, and I felt like I'd been given a map to pirate treasure. Now I read voraciously, learning everything I could about neuroplasticity, cognitive behavioral therapy, eye movement desensitization. I wanted to decode my own story. I was like Sherlock Holmes, except instead of a deerstalker cap, I wore steel-toed boots. Instead of a magnifying glass, I wielded statistics. I had a nose for sniffing out bullshit, and I knew how to turn it against itself. Here's what I learned. The amygdala, it's your brain's smoke alarm. For some of us, it never stops ringing. Imagine trying to sleep with a fire drill in your head. That's trauma. Now picture the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of reason. Trauma kicks it out of the office and lets panic run the company. So when people say, you're overreacting, you're not. You're rewired to survive hell, even in heaven. We call it PTSD. I call it the ghost in the basement of my mind. It doesn't haunt you every day, but when it does, it redecorates the walls with memories you never chose. There's no such thing as being too sensitive. We're just terminally terrified. So let me tell you something about resilience. You can't buy it in a pharmacy. You can't order it online. It's not a choice. It's a product of abuse. Now sure, you can put on a brave face, pretend that you're Miss or Mr. Congeniality, but behind closed doors, you're shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Resilience is the art of picking yourself up after someone stomped on your dreams and hobbies. It's dusting yourself off when your only wish was to disappear. People call me resilient. They say I'm a warrior. What they do and know is that I stitched myself together using threads of broken promises and empty rooms. My backbone, recycled from every get over it I ever heard. I wear my trauma like armor, not a badge. I wrote my first poem when I was 12. It wasn't pretty, but I felt alive when I read it to an audience for the first time. And that feeling, that rush of adrenaline, endorphins, dopamine, that was my drug. I became addicted to the applause. It made me feel human. I poured everything into my writing, the pain, the anger, the loneliness, and slowly I began to heal. Now I'm a published author. The irony isn't lost on me. I make my living writing about pain. People ask, does it get easier? Well, yeah, it does. But I wouldn't trade my scars for anything. Hey, they're my battle map, each one telling a story of survival. I used to think vulnerability was a weakness, but it's my superpower now. I'm not afraid to show up, be seen, to feel the full range of human emotions, because I know on the other side of fear is freedom. As they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. But here's the truth. I learned to pour until my cup shattered into shards. And in those shards, I found 1,000,000 stars. When you survive, you find a way. You pick up the pieces, and you build a new world on top of the rubble. I don't remember the last time I cried, but I also don't remember being ashamed of it. I don't expect understanding, but I'd appreciate the silence. The world didn't save me, but I learned to carry my scars like war medals I never asked for. This is my story. Yours is still unfolding. Might not be pretty, but it's real. And that's more than some people can say. Some nights I still flinch at loud noises, but I no longer apologize for it. I am scarred, yes, but I am not broken. Your pain is just power in disguise. When it finds the right outlet, oh baby, you can move mountains.